We can't stay here. We're leaving. Now.
Brimstone was cutting no corners as he stepped out of the thoroughly destroyed medical room. There's still a lot I can gather from these terminals, Brim. Glimmerlight was frantically moving through the side science chambers, sifting through diary after diary and murmuring details while Brimstone had cleaned house. You have no idea how amazing the technology they've been working on is. If we could get this out into the wastes and finalize it, we could get properly trained ponies building again. We could...
If we stay here, we're dead. Now come on!
Well then give me time. I've got the prototype orbs, but this terminal has the spell on it. I need to get rid of the file so Red Eye can't... Brimstone smashed the terminal clean off the desk to end the argument before it had even begun, making me squeak in shock. His move stunned even Glimmerlight as the terminal itself slammed into a nearby wall and broke into 1,000 tiny pieces. She just sat still, blinking for a second, her hooves hovering in the air where the keyboard had been. That works too.
Come on!
His voice brokered no argument. Taking off after him, I struggled to keep up with the massive raider in his huge strides. Running down darker corridors lit only by scant pitbuck light and an illumination spell, Brimstone led us to another set of stairs. What was going on above? Oh wait, friends now. I could ask. What's going on, Brimstone? He must not have heard me over the clattering of all our hooves on the thin metal scaffold stairs. This staircase clearly had been scratch-built into the stable after it had closed. Up 3 floors. On each one the sounds became louder. Heavy weaponry roared, the clattering of metal and roars of... what were they? The floor was shaking and smoke was already drifting in through some of the floors we had passed. What's going on? Diving into a corridor, Brimstone finally heard me, turned, and then immediately snapped around and dove across the corridor into an adjoining room. Just before I followed, a projectile whooshed past me, trailing smoke. Seconds later, a concussive blast reverberated up the hallway that sent my sensitive ears into aching spasms. If I hadn't had them repaired, that would have been immobilizing. Just what had that been? Glimmerlight ducked back against the wall and peered around. Oh no! Poking my head out under her hooves, I witnessed a demon made real. Stood amongst a burning corridor, angular, wreathed in fire and ash. It came galloping down the hallway, its hooves sparking on the metal floor. Shaped like a pony but made of dark metal, it continued its charge, a huge rotary cannon screaming, strafing lines of devastation all over the corridor. The sight made me flinch back, whimpering in the corner as I prayed it would just pass. All I felt was Glimmerlight grabbing me. Move, Murky! Move or you're dead! You can't hide from them! Screaming at the top of my lungs in sheer terror, I followed her as we charged into the main corridor to where Brimstone was. A haphazard glance led me to see the metal beast stopping to unleash hell into one room. I heard hoarse-voiced ponies screaming and gurgling as the weaponry tore them apart so violently that I saw parts come flying out of the doorway. Up ahead, Brimstone pounded through the chamber, bulldozing into a rusty door to collapse it and knock it out of place enough that we could force our way into the next corridor. Behind us, the sounds of metal hooves on the floor resumed, coming closer after the demon had dealt with the raiders it had spotted.
They're coming! Just gallop! Go!
I saw Brimstone spin and grab the old assault rifle from his back. Clenching the mouth grip, he unloaded the entire load of rounds down the corridor. Sparks flew, walls charred, and the floor plates kicked up as the sharpened armor-penetrating rounds hurtled down the hall with deadly force to destroy absolutely everything other than the giant, almost unmissable figure that stomped towards us. Glimmer cast Brimstone a narrowed glance. You weren't kidding when you said you couldn't aim!
Shut up! Move!
Following Brimstone through, we rounded into a firestorm. The entire corridor was filled with smoke flowing from broken wall panels and furiously burning pools of oil. We had went from the cold dark to the fiery light. Squealing, I hopped back as sparks landed on my woolen fleece, lighting it until my hooves desperately patted it out. My mane felt frazzled already, and my eyes stung under even my goggles. I was reminded oddly of Philadelphia with the fire and rust, only enough to give an odd sense of familiarity, before I felt Brimstone's teeth grab my fleece and hurl me through a room's window. Crashing over some pony's old board game and collapsing the table below it, I felt the pieces digging into my body painfully. Landing in the heap upon the floor, I groaned and staggered up, watching Glimmer and Brimstone climb through after me. Behind them, masses of small explosions took out the majority of the wall panels, sending shrapnel pinging all over the corridor and into our room. I cowered, covering my face as the whizzing metal sprayed around us. I felt one bit embed itself into my journal by my side. What shape was the surrounding area like? Where did this room go? I didn't know. This was too fast, too violent. I had no idea what kind of area I was in or where I could go. Brimstone grunted in pain, staggering. I saw blood pooling on his side where shreds of fragmentation had penetrated his thick hide. Sobering up at the sight, I saw we were in an office. The window had led from the corridor, but the door ahead of us, the only way out, led into another corridor entirely.
Goddesses, damn it. I really hate those big guns. Keep going. It's coming.
We ran through the door. Behind us, through the window I had been thrown through, I saw the massive steel pony glance in at us, before bracing itself and diving through the window. Turning, it aimed at us while we ran through the door. Yet even as it swung those weapons around, the room we had just left let out an electronic scream.
Eyes, for spark coal. Signal detected. Depressurization route.
The room's door between it and ourselves slammed shut so close to me that it almost took my tail off. A second later, the rocket fired by the demon slammed into it, denting the thick metal. Somehow I couldn't quite feel thankful for that hideous routine, even after that. Brimstone seemed to know the way he had come down, leading up around another corner. Before I knew it, we were back in the atrium, entering via a previously closed door into the canteen. Galloping for the door, I saw the huge pile of loot was completely abandoned and partially ablaze. Scar marks of weapons fire puckered the entire floor, while the bodies of raiders lay in various pieces. "Murky, stop! The area up ahead is sure to be covered!" Glimmerlight's words gave me reason to stop and roll under a table out of sheer habit. I watched them look back behind us through the door as it slid closed. Up ahead, I could hear furious gunfire, going two ways this time. Brimstone Blitz snarled.
They must have brought half their fucking force to get by the small army Red Eye posted outside. Had to dodge 2 more on the way down. There's about 4 scraps inside the stable. Must really want this place.
"Of course, Brim," retorted Glimmerlight. "A stable in their neck of the woods? Only just discovered? The Steel Rangers would move the sun and the moon if they thought they could capture it from Red Eye.
And fuck every slave inside, right?
Yeah, they think like that now. To them we're just looters and scavengers like every pony else." Brimstone craned his head up before scowling.
Don't suppose your standing will help us.
If they knew who I was, they'd probably get even madder. What do you mean by scraps anyway?
Rangers. Ponies hiding under what will be scrap metal if I get my way. Rangers are scraps, ghouls are rots. Just part of the way of life to name things.
Steel Rangers. I'd heard of them, obviously. Every pony had. But I'd never seen one. Frantic images of the steel-clad pony bounding through fire, heavy weaponry spewing death ahead of it. Unstoppable machines of war by my perceptions. If they'd been designed to intimidate, the ministry who built them had succeeded. It was hard to imagine there was some pony inside of one of those things. If they'd taken out Red Eye's forces, then... Wait. Time seemed to slow, to stop. Every sound faded. Only my heartbeat remained. If Red Eye's forces had been taken out, that meant there were no slavers watching us anymore. We were outside the wall. Staggering, not hearing anything properly, as though I was submerged in water, I wandered into the atrium. Around me, sparks and smoke swirled as the venting fans did their best on automatic. Above me on the balcony, shadows moved back and forth, edges of sudden light peeling off into the corridors. Were they the residents or just ponies firing at the Rangers? I could feel wisps in the air near me, but nothing could draw my attention but for one thing. Ahead of me, the main exit that led to the stable door room lay open. Almost imaginary, I could feel the wind flowing in there from my mane. Could I? Was it that simple? To come out there, face my greatest fear, and then just go? Cold fear gripped me. What if Red Eye was still out there? What if I let hope get the better of me and the Master had brought reinforcements to decimate the Rangers and reclaim me? 1,000 reasons to be afraid, and only one to try. One dream. Dare to dream. The words barely a whisper from my mouth as I felt each hoof move on its own accord. A second chance to try. A low sound, one steadily growing in volume, made me turn. I thought it was Brimstone. A huge silhouette charging through the smoke, directly at me. The sound heightened in pitch as the keening scream of a spark engine began to pick up speed. Glimmerlight crashed into me, hurling me to the side. A strafing burst of fire whipped past where I had stood so fast that it was little more than a single deathly wail than a series of shots. Sound returned, a sudden scene of abject carnage exploding around me as Glimmerlight and I dragged ourselves into the cover of a thick metal bench. The Ranger was being peppered from every direction. Raiders on the balcony pouring fire at the thick armor. Most of the rounds fired by the rusty weapons merely pinged and whistled off it. Bracing itself, the Ranger twisted its huge body, swinging around a colossal pair of weapons. One, a multi-barreled cannon, and the short but wide barrel. A belt of grenades fed into the latter. Starting the engines of the big saddle again, it unleashed hell. Covering my ears, feeling Glimmer pressing herself as low as possible over me, the sound felt like the world tearing apart as the Ranger dragged itself in the circle, ripping the balcony from the walls as raiders and slaves fell from above in pieces. No single sound stood out amongst the firing, impact, and devastation wrought. Parts of metal fell over us, along with immensely drowning sounds of large metal plates tumbling from the walls and flipping over on the atrium floor. Behind us I heard whoops of victory from somewhere. I never found out why. Every noise echoed back and forth, slapping my senses in every direction as I desperately tried to scream into Glimmer's ear about the exit. A shadow fell across us. Brimstone Blitz rushed forward, a huge L-shaped piece of wall panel balanced over his body.
Move! Move!
We required no telling. Using him as literal moving cover, the three of us sprinted through the intense firefight into the main corridor. The way out! I couldn't not scream it. Red Eye's guards must be gone! We can get out! Be free! Up the main stairway we ran. Behind us the battle continued. One Ranger against a dozen raiders that had survived in the side rooms and balconies. The Ranger's presence was the only thing that had saved Glimmer and I from being targets from above. My mind was too focused. I wasn't meant for battle. If only the Rangers knew we simply wanted out the way. Wouldn't they be fine with us leaving? But no. Just as the residents of the stable had become corrupted by the dark to distrust and fear their neighbors, were the ponies of the wasteland sickened by the darkness of their lands to fear the worst and never assume. Barb had been right, as had my old master. History repeated itself, again and again, in different ways, but always ending in the same way, in the crushing of trust and innocence. Well, I wanted no part of it, no longer. I was going to leave it all behind, pass beyond my fear and take one more chance. Facing the past had done it. I felt the burning desire in me, the willpower to willingly take a chance. We were going out there. We were escaping. Somehow I knew they'd follow, and they did. Together we ran into the great stable door room. Together we saw the sunlight streaming in. Together we fell, as the Steel Ranger on guard's anti-machine rifle slapped into the ground in front of us. The concussive wave behind it blew me clean off my hooves. Glimmer tripped as she fell over me. In front of us lay slaver after raider who had tried the same, who had tested this beast's stubborn defense of the way out. Brimstone was not as simple to knock over. He whirled on the spot, diving at the Ranger and, using his entire weight, bent the barrel of the long rifle before tearing it clean off the battle saddle. Swinging it on the spot, he brought it crashing down against the Ranger like a club. The weapon shattered, exploding into its component parts, and yet the metal pony was not thrown down. Rounding off, the big earth pony rolled away, dodging the return hoof swipe, and faced down the Ranger.
Stand down, Raider. You're unarmed.
A harsh voice, distorted by armor and replayed through the helmet. It was almost genderless. Female? Or was it lighter from the tinny replay voice? Brimstone didn't even wait to reply. Time was against us, till the other Rangers got here. Bellowing at a volume I had never believed he could, I saw the great warlord charge a Ranger just by himself in that hulking armor.
For the chapter in the ministry!
The Steel Ranger nobly screamed their own war cry and thundered forward. What ensued was the most brutal crash I thought I would ever see. Glimmer and I could only sit as far away as possible as we witnessed metal against flesh, hydraulic technology against sheer power. Clashing hard enough to send a shockwave through the floor of the room, both rose to their back hooves, towering high enough that even griffins would have been cast in shadow before the hooves began to swing. Neither gave. Backed by the armor, the Ranger took Brimstone's charge like a solid wall, powering her own hoof around to force Brimstone to the side. Swinging his entire body, the Raider whirled and dropped every ounce of his weight to throw the Ranger above him into the wall. Like a thunderclap, the power-armored pony left a dent as deep as I was wide. Undeterred, she charged back at Brimstone, sending him careening into the railings by the doorway. Crumpling under their combined weight, the two crashed down to the next level behind them, rolling and slapping hooves hard enough to kill a normal pony into one another. Already Brimstone's face was filled with bloody marks, and his body bruised around puckered scars. Cursing and stomping the ground, Brimstone swung up faster than any pony his size had any right moving, to buck the Ranger square in the side. With a sound like the goddesses themselves stepping hoof upon Equestria, the armored warrior flew over 10 feet backwards with a deep indent on the side plate. Brimstone wasn't done. Not giving his opponent 1 inch, frothing at the mouth and his eyes bloodshot and wild, he charged over, leaping and slamming both front hooves down on the ground. As much as Brimstone himself moved fast, the Ranger did too. With an unusual sound, she rolled the armor over the ground away from his slam. Lifting herself up, the pair wrestled, wrapping front hooves around the others to gain leverage. It suddenly appeared to me how matched they were in different ways. The Ranger had a mechanical strength that went on and off at unstoppable levels, but Brimstone's power was variable, able to twist and redirect in ways the Ranger armor never could. His savagery and experience was showing as he took advantage of the armor's joint limitations, while the Ranger used that sudden ability to surge power into movements to force back her opponent. Eventually, though, beyond all thought that beggared belief, Brimstone was actually forcing back a suit of power armor by sheer strength alone. With a twist and a shove, he threw the Ranger to the side, hurling her through the glass of a nearby control panel room. Somehow still moving, the dented armor plate restricting her movements, she held both of her front hooves together around a metal beam, using the armor's shape to hold the bar steady. With a mighty swing, the beam set a course for Brimstone's head. Horrifyingly, it connected. The warlord collapsed to the side, stunned. Without mercy, his opponent stood, pounding hoof after armored hoof down upon my friend. I didn't know what drove me. Grabbing my metal ruler in my teeth, all I knew was I had to help him however I could. There was only one place I knew of that I could hurt most ponies in. With all my might, I swung the ruler up and under the armored tail. There was a dull clang. My teeth chattered and my entire body shook as the impact came right back down to me instead. Almost dismissively, the Ranger cast its head backward.
You have to be kidding me. Really?
The back hoof shot out. About to scream, I felt my entire body dragged backwards, as Glimmerlight caught me in her telekinetic net enough to at least pull my tiny weight away before it connected. I hadn't done a thing. Only I had. Those few seconds of distraction were what her opponent needed. With a mighty roar, Brimstone Blitz, the great Raider warlord, the scourge of Ponyville, rose up and took the Ranger with him. Stunning my every sense, I witnessed him rear up, lifting the entire Ranger with him in his front hooves, then twist and bring her down with the strength of a vengeful god. The Ranger hit the floor so hard I felt my entire body kicked up off the ground by the shockwave falling on my side. And then silence. Brimstone staggered across. I had never seen the big pony look so worn out, yet, in his eyes, I could see a strength still, that fury that could drive him to go on and on. The Ranger lay in a crumpled heap. Glimmer hastened over, but from the angle of the helmet, it was clear this was done. She sighed, laying a hoof upon the breastplate. Rest with the great heroes of the orders, noble Ranger. I blinked a few times before it struck home. On separate sides or not, all Steel Rangers still shared the same bond and hardships they'd endured to be part of that group. Glimmerlight's reverence for one of their fallen, regardless of intent, was proof enough of that. Brimstone merely spat blood onto the grilled floor nearby.
Thought the ones in this area had cleared out. Gone to some other stable near Ponyville lately to try and take it. At least that's what the slavers reported.
Glimmer shrugged. Perhaps these ones were still out on long patrol when the others left. Perhaps they were given the mission to retrieve the technology in here first, then join their comrades. The ministries were active in here, so we likely had records of it. To be honest, I wish I could have helped them. The memory orb research is better in their hooves than Red-Eye. This is all just... Brimstone sat, nursing his face and moving each joint to make sure it still worked properly. By the sounds of it, some didn't. Not that he seemed to care. But my attention was on Glimmer. She bent over the ranger, her magic accessing a panel until the helmet clicked free. Underneath was a snow-white and light blue-maned mare, hard-looking and rough from days inside the suit. Her neck was twisted at an odd angle. Even as I watched, Glimmer closed her eyes gently before seeming to sniff. Friendship wasn't something I really knew, but at that moment, even to me it was obvious what she needed. Limping over, I leaned over to her, wrapping my hooves around her neck and squeezing gently. Over her shoulder in the dark of the corner, something shifted. Nothing any pony but me saw. A drifting darkness that flowed from vents and ducts and never once approached the light. A vague pony-shaped head watched as, even today, ponies on the same side were forced to watch one another die because of fears and dangers around them making them be this way. To see the cycle repeat again and again. Feeling Glimmer hold on to me, I watched as the vague shape seemed to tremble, the lidless eyes falling on her bag that carried the research. Tensing, I expected the worst to reclaim its property. But hidden from my friends, I watched as it seemed to relax and slide away again. I could only hope that it had seen Glimmerlight as the correct pony to at last take their most treasured items that had caused all this in the first place. That, perhaps under her watch, the research so many died for might still mean something someday. As it faded, I heard it one last time.